Hello and welcome to GreenBiz Studio. My name's Jim Giles. I'm VP for Net Zero here at GreenBiz Group, and I'm delighted to have with me Patrick Flynn, who is SVP and Global Head of Sustainability at Salesforce. Hey, Patrick.
Hey, Jim. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for joining me. So Today we're going to talk about the role that cloud technologies can play in the transition to net zero. And I'm sort of curious to get started on this conversation because when I think about that transition, I'll be honest, cloud technologies are not the first things that come to mind. I'll often think about how we're going to measure scope 3 emissions or what is the strategy for switching to renewables. So just kick us off by making that connection between cloud technologies and this big net zero challenge that we're facing.
Sure. I think I'll answer it maybe in two parts, Jim. One is that indeed often cloud technology and the infrastructure that supports them is not on people's radar. But every time you refresh a browser or scroll on your phone, some server in some data center somewhere is working just a little bit harder, consuming a little bit more electricity. And on today's grids with dirty electricity, for the most part, that means more emissions. And so here at Salesforce, what we focus on first and foremost is operational excellence, decarbonization across our full scope 1, 2, 3 value chain. We have net zero residual emissions, and all of our data centers, offices, all of our operations are powered with new renewable energy that we've helped bring to the grid. But then the real exciting thing is that digital technology can help us manage information, gain insight, and take action. And so when I think about the role of Salesforce's cloud technology, the real exciting thing begins when we start using our superpower, which is putting digital tools in the hands of our customers to help them navigate successfully into the future, putting that superpower to work for climate action in the form of net zero cloud and the net zero marketplace.
So that's really interesting. That connection does seem clear to me, but make it a little bit more concrete. Maybe give me an example of a company that is using the Salesforce Net Zero Cloud and talk about some of the benefits they're seeing.
Well, sure. I'll give you a couple examples. And what we're seeing across all customers is that really for every organization overnight, your greenhouse gas emissions data needs to look like the quality of your financial data. And it needs to be disclosed through similar channels. You need to manage it. You need to present it to the board of directors. There's a real need for rapid maturity in the way that we manage information. AT&T is a net zero cloud customer, and their superpower is really the network and the sensors that can bring information into net zero cloud. They're using it as part of their Connected Climate Initiative, which aims to reduce emissions by 1 gigaton by 2035. Another example is Crowley Maritime. They're a net zero cloud customer. They aim to be the most sustainable maritime and logistics solutions company in the world. And by focusing on their scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, they estimate that they'll be able to reduce emissions by 4.2 million tons per year.
That's great. And it's interesting that you mentioned this idea that companies' emissions data needs to be as the same quality as their financial data. I think that's definitely something that we see coming from the SEC and bodies in Europe is this push for more disclosure. And I'd like to just finish now by broadening it out and using that as an example, as you look to the remainder of this decade, what's been called the decisive decade in our transition to net zero, maybe just give us one or two big challenges that you see ahead for companies as they make this transition to net zero.
Sure. I think if we look at the decade ahead, the biggest decade that has ever mattered for our species, the real big nature of the challenge is speed and scale. We know we have to rapidly reduce emissions and bring carbon out of the atmosphere. And so one challenge is just the recognition that this is an all of the above moment. We need all good strategies executed in parallel with expert precision as fast as possible. And so that means emissions reductions. It also means looking to nature to bring carbon out of the atmosphere, things like the Trillion Tree Initiative and 1T.org, our own 100 million tree commitment. So doing things all together, or as my friend Kate Brandt from Google said the other day, everything everywhere all at once. And I couldn't have said it better. I think the other challenge is also a great opportunity, and that has to do with, in service of trying to move at speed and scale that the situation demands, we have to collaborate. And so I see that less as a challenge and more as an opportunity. Recent Salesforce research found that 8 in 10 workers want to help their company operate more sustainably. So I think one challenge for those of us who have been in this industry for a while is we start to become the ambassadors, the enlistment officers for all of those employees and friends and family members, colleagues who are waking up and who want to take action. And we have a responsibility to collaborate with them, bring them on their journey, and bring them into the adventure alongside us.
Great. Thanks so much, Patrick. Those are amazing messages to highlight. We're going to be tracking those issues with great interest for sure. And I just want to round up by saying thanks so much for joining us here on GreenBiz Studio.
Very, very glad to be here. Great to see you, Jim.